All right, let's get straight to the White House again. Peter Doocy is standing by. Peter, what are you hearing was the main frustration of President Trump's when it came to Pam Bondi, obviously making it very clear that the relationship was still intact, but he no longer wanted her to run the place?
Sandra, I can tell you that I phoned President Trump to ask him, once these reports started coming out, that the Attorney General had been told that her time, it was nearing the end of her time at the Justice Department, and the President said he was preparing some remarks. We think that it is going to be the official announcement about the Attorney General Bondi leaving the Justice Department. She will not be leaving the administration. They are going to find a different job for her. So President Trump thinks that she did a good job. President Trump still likes her, but at this time, he feels like Todd Blanche should be elevated in an interim role. So the plan, at least as of the last couple minutes, and a lot of things are changing, is to name Todd Blanche in an interim role as the country's top law enforcement officer running the Justice Department. We are hearing a lot of different things about why this might happen. We think President Trump will elaborate on that more. But when you talk to people here at the White House, it is very important to them, just to reiterate, that there's not bad blood right now with Bondi leaving. And we know that she was in the front row at the president's remarks last night during his address to the nation. So she is somebody that he still wants to have around, but he wants Todd Blanche, who has been with the president during some of the hardest times of his political life, when he was dealing with all these many lawsuits during the 4 years in between his first term and his second term. Todd Blanche was right there with them, fighting on the president's defense, legal defense. And now Todd Blanche gets a crack, at least temporarily, as the Attorney General of the United States.
Peter, we were just showing the video, a reminder to our viewers yesterday, when the president appeared at the Supreme Court to hear the government's arguments in his case. He arrived with Pam Bondi.
Yeah, I wonder what they talked about in the car, because that was just more than 24 hours ago. And again, it seems like she and the president still have a good relationship, but she will no longer be his Attorney General.
Yeah, and I know certainly just in the last few days, President Trump has praised her and said Attorney General Pam Bondi, he said, is a wonderful person and she is doing a great job. So certainly still support for her there. When you look back at her time as Attorney General, what sort of stands out to you?
You know, she is somebody who was pretty much in lockstep with President Trump on just about all of his legal priorities, but she wound up taking as much incoming as anybody from congressional Democrats for every time that they would haul her before Congress for whatever the issue was. It seemed like she had to be the one that was taking the most incoming. And she never really deviated from the line that folks here at the White House were using. But they want to shake things up. And we expect to hear some specifics about why they want to shake things up. But all that we know at this moment is that the president feels like it is time.
Yeah. And that he informed her last night before the speech. So, Peter, you can obviously hear the media fired up on all sides of you there at the White House. Is the Todd Blanche an interim replacement? Obviously, he's the deputy AG. Or will he step in for the time being? Or is that, do you think, a full-time replacement for Bondi?
I am told that Todd is going to be the temporary replacement, the interim replacement. There are some names that are out there. The New York Times is reporting that Lee Zeldin has talked to the president about the possibility. We know that there are also a bunch of former state attorney generals who are serving as Republicans in the Senate right now. We don't know how seriously President Trump would look at any of them, or if there's somebody from outside the administration, not an elected lawmaker, who the president might like for this. But it is an important job. And the president's going to have some time because he is elevating Todd Blanche, somebody that he has known for a long time, somebody that he really trusts, at least temporarily. And as for what comes next for Bondi, we don't know. But she's not just going home to Florida. She is going to have some other job within the administration. We don't know what that is, and we don't know if she knows what that is, because this is all happening just in the last couple minutes.
looks like we're getting a little bit more color on the situation through our reporter Aisha Hassi. She says she just spoke with Bondi before you broke the news, Peter. She said she's working right now in Florida filming a child ID kit for abducted children with the NFL. She flew into Tampa this morning and went straight to work. They will share those pictures soon, but no specific comment on the firing. So we'll see what comes from the president here shortly. Peter, stand by with us on the breaking news.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And for now, let's go to Fox News Justice correspondent David Spunt. Hi, David. What have you heard?
Well, we knew that Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General, was on thin ice for a long time with this administration, though she has a personal close relationship with President Trump. She's known him for years. She was the Attorney General in the state of Florida. He's a resident of Florida. She was his attorney during his impeachment trial in the Senate during his first term. So President Trump and Pam Bondi have a good personal relationship. But we know administration officials were not happy with the way the Epstein files were handled. This is something that has really hurt the Attorney General since she came into office in February of 2025. Just some history there. She comes into office February 2025, and then a few weeks later, in an interview with John Roberts, I believe it was during this hour on Fox News with John and Sandra, said the Epstein files were on her desk, or the files were on her desk when she was asked about the Epstein files. She later clarified and said that she meant the JFK files, the RFK files, the Martin Luther King files, as well as the Epstein files. But there were so many more questions just about the overall handling of the Justice Department dealing with the Epstein files. And the Epstein files story really never went away from Attorney General Bondi. Over the summer, DOJ put out a release and they said that there would be nothing further warranted from the Epstein files. No charges would be filed. The case is essentially closed. And then Deputy Attorney General, now I guess we could call him Interim Attorney General Todd Blanche, met with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend and co-conspirator, convicted co-conspirator. So the story never fully went away. In fact, Bondi was supposed to testify before Congress in a deposition about Epstein on April 14th in just a couple of weeks. So she clearly will no longer have to do that. The video on the other side of the screen, as I look right there, that was her on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. That's after coming out of a closed-door briefing with members of the House to talk about the Epstein files. But members of Congress, they were not satisfied with the answers they were getting from the administration, and Bondi ultimately had to answer those questions when she came out and would have had to answer during a deposition. Guys.
David Spunt, thanks so much, David. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, let's bring in our chief legal correspondent and host of Fox News Sunday, Shannon Bream, is here on the breaking news as well. She joins us by phone. Shannon, your thoughts as we learn more details?
Yeah, guys, I think that there had been such pressure on the Attorney General on so many different fronts to deliver for the president. As, you know, David referenced these things. There were a lot of promises coming in about the RFK or JFK files, about Martin Luther King Jr. files, about Epstein. And there was so much pressure that, you know, some folks thought she got ahead of what they were able to deliver at the DOJ, that there were times that there were promises that, you know, leveled a lot of expectations. And the president had his own expectations. We remember the odd tweet that went out that many people believed was supposed to be a direct message to her, asking about possible cases involving possible political rivals or settling scores, those kinds of things. And the president clearly wanting her to be aggressive on a number of fronts. And maybe that's why some of the promises that she made felt like they were getting ahead of what DOJ was able to deliver. But you know, she's got a long, deep experience in Florida as Attorney General there, and as being known as a very effective prosecutor, but also just very loyal to President Trump. And it may have been at some points that, you know, the selection this time around with a lot of his closest circle was a lot about loyalty. The first time around, he trusted other people. He trusted the experience and the recommendations. He wanted people around him like Pam Bondi, who he trusted to have his back. But I think he felt so much pressure on so many fronts to deliver and felt like she hadn't done it. And maybe this is the time where you look at your poll numbers and you say, how do I shake things up?
Shannon, so Todd Blanche is taking over in an interim position. What do we know about him? What do you think, how different might he be moving forward?
Well, listen, he is a tough litigator, too, and he's been close to the president litigating a number of issues very important to the president in his private life and in other places before he joined the DOJ. He's also someone seen as very hard-charging, very loyal to the president, somebody who may have different experience than the outgoing Attorney General Pam Bondi when it comes to litigation and the ways that he's been linked to the president's legal efforts. He's definitely a President Trump loyalist. There's no doubt about that. So he may pick up this mantle with some tougher investigations and different probing than maybe Attorney General Bondi had done in a way that I think the president definitely trusts him. And so we'll have to see his vetting process now.
What do you think was the final straw here as we wait to hear directly from President Trump about this ousting?
I mean, that's a great question. Attorney General Bondi has been in a number of these very heated Capitol Hill hearings. David talked about this too. And there were times when, there's a lot of pressure on those close to the president when they go to the Hill and they start coming under this really tough questioning. And the president is watching. That's really your audience. And you want to know that you are performing to the levels that he's going to be happy with the way that you handle things. And she got a lot of praise from MAGA World for being very combative and being able to stand up and take the incoming and those kinds of things in these hearings. But there's always a lot of reflection after they're there and they're on the Hill. How did they perform? How did they do defending the president's policies? And we know the president had been asking his inner circle in recent days about her and possibly some other people within the administration. Was it time for a change? Sort of taking the pulse of people around him. And once he does that, many times it turns into an exit path for somebody that he thinks may need a change. But she's been incredibly loyal to him, and I would imagine that he's going to be very complimentary to her. And maybe with, like, Secretary Noem finds another position for her that he may be able to say is a better match.
And I suppose, a few weeks ago, Kristi Noem, we moved on, and now Pam Bondi, and some talk perhaps about Tulsi Gabbard at some point. Do you think it's a sort of a redirection, perhaps, heading into the midterms? Do you think President Trump is looking ahead?
Yeah, Ben, I think that's a great question, especially when the polling has been really tough on a number of issues, not only on including the war and the economy, all of those things that people are feeling the daily effects when they go to the gas pump, when they go to the grocery store. Those things weigh on any midterm election. They almost always end up in a severe punishment for the current sitting president. But I think when he looks around at some of these other things that are bubbling there as well, including his overall approval rating, he may feel like, all right, if I'm going to do this, this is the time for a reset. If he's lacking confidence in some particular policy or person carrying out that policy, the midterms are getting closer every day, and there's only so much time to show that you're going to do a pivot, make a big change, and that may have been weighing on his mind.
You're reminded, as we did a moment ago with Peter Doocy, Shannon, that we just saw her yesterday alongside the president as they appeared together at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting there. I saw them, and everybody looked very chummy. It was her along with Secretary Lutnick sitting with the president, very dialed in. Obviously, this birthright citizenship, a huge issue for the president, one of his first executive orders, a very big issue for him legally. For him to show up as the first sitting president telegraphed a lot of weight on this argument yesterday. And so they were sitting there together, clearly as his top law enforcement officer, as the Attorney General. She was a part of that A-list bench that was there together. And they looked very chummy. At one point, there was actually some passing of notes. And you wouldn't have, from seeing them together in court yesterday, imagined that there was something that there was this close to being in the offing.
We've heard the name Lee Zeldin perhaps suggested as a possible full-term replacement. What do you think, Lee Zeldin, what role would he play? How different would he be?
Well, listen, he's also a very experienced lawyer, too, and has had all kinds of different things in his background as EPA administrator. He's tackled regulatory bottlenecks and all kinds of different things. He's somebody, again, that the president very much trusts. He's a loyalist to President Trump, but an experienced attorney as well. And, they're all going to have their different ways that they tackle this particular list of to-do things within the DOJ. But gosh, the DOJ is endlessly busy. Not only is the administration being sued on so many fronts in a way that has just exploded during the first and second Trump administrations, going to court seems to be the very popular way to go after the president's policies. And they know that. A lot of the policies that they've launched, they did so knowing it would go to a legal challenge, and they want that answer on the boundaries of the president's executive power. So there's a lot of incoming, but there's a lot of outgoing as well with the DOJ, litigation with respect to, different states, their policies with respect to transgender policies, educational higher ed institutions. So it is an all-encompassing job, this role of Attorney General, that is balancing so many, fires essentially to handle and to put out at one time, that whoever steps into this job permanently is going to be exceptionally busy.
All right, Shannon, I'm sure we're going to get a lot more detail here in the coming moments, either directly from the president or his team at the White House. It appears that our reporters, David Spunt and Aisha Hosni, are saying that they still haven't gotten Bondi herself to acknowledge that she has been ousted or even comment about it. So we'll also wait to hear directly from her as well. Shannon, thank you very much.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.